Right, so we're about letting people bring whatever device that they want into the enterprise, and the software that we provide, which is called Divide, basically divides your phone in two, right? So you end up with a personal side of the device where you can do whatever you like, browse whatever you like, download whatever apps you want, and then on the work side of the device, the company can control that. It's cloud connected, and it's very, very secure, and gives the company all that good stuff that they're looking for in terms of confidence around their data.
Yeah. And when we do events with Wakefield, we like to inject some storytelling into it. We think that it breaks up kind of the traditional panels. We think it's a lot more fun and sort of humanizes both founders but also companies. So Andrew, maybe you can tell us a story about how the idea came about, or where you guys were working, or how the core idea of Enterproid came about.
Yeah, so we're always core technologists, and we were working at Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley is a very forward-looking company. It spends a lot of money on technologies. It is a bank, but it spends a lot of money on general technology. We were running mobile there, and then what happened is one day, many days, we had a managing director who was always complaining, and what he was complaining about was, he said, listen, every day I got my BlackBerry, that's my phone, I love my BlackBerry, but we at Morgan Stanley enforced a screen lock password, right? Like, to unlock your device, you had to put in a 8-digit complicated password. It had to have letters and capitals and numbers in it. And he said, that's fine, right? But every day I go home and I almost kill myself because I'm going down the highway, I'm driving home at like 80 miles an hour, and I've got like one hand open trying to call my wife to let her know that I'm coming home, and I'm trying to put in my password, I'm trying to press shift and like put all these characters in, I'm all careening up and down the highway, and like this happens all the time, and I want you to just get rid of this screen lock password because I'm going to kill myself. And we were like, well, okay, yeah, we understand your problem, but you got secure data on this device, right? We need security, we need to protect the data. This is Morgan Stanley client information. This is why we have this complicated screen lock, to protect the firm, and he's like, I totally get it. Right? If I have all sorts of Bill Gates' information or something on my phone, I totally get why I need to put a password in if I'm going to call Bill Gates, or if I'm going to try to email Bill Gates. But I'm not. I'm calling my wife, right? Like, why do you care that I'm calling my wife? Why do I have to put in this password to call my wife? And we were like, well, we don't actually care, right? It's just that there's no way for us to actually distinguish between those two things. The screen lock password is the screen lock password. But then I was like, okay, so this guy's got a good point there, and he's calling like every 2 weeks, and I want to get him out of my hair. So then we went to RIM. We had a very good relationship with RIM, the maker of the BlackBerry, and we said, here's this problem, right? Like, people are using these devices, and yes, sometimes they're using it for work stuff, but sometimes they're using it for personal stuff too. And we don't mind that, and we want a way to actually just let them make that distinction. And RIM was like, nope, security. And we're like, yeah, we get security, but in this case, security, I have a very deep background in security, but security is not important. He's calling his wife, and they're like, nope, security. And we're like, no, really, we don't care in this case. And they're like, nope, we're all about security, and there's nothing we can do. So that's really when we first started saying, this is ridiculous. Like, at the time, BlackBerry's RIM stock price was like $80, and they were doing really well. But we started to say, this is gonna have to change. People are gonna start using these devices for more than just the firm stuff. The companies themselves don't mind. This is a big bank, this is Morgan Stanley. We don't mind that your employees are using their devices for their own stuff. We gotta protect our own data, we gotta protect our apps, but it's okay for them to do their own stuff as well. And RIM didn't get it, RIM still doesn't get it. And then once the iPhone came out, and once Android came out, then things really started to change. And that's when we said, you know what, now's the time. We're gonna solve this problem for everybody, and that's why we sort of want to make Divide.
And just in terms of time frame, when you guys made this discovery, this is back 2005, 2006, yes, 2007. So the adoption of the RIM devices in the workplace was still skyrocketing. Yeah. There really wasn't yet another platform, right? So pre-iPhone, pre-Android, so you guys discovered this idea and then really sit on it and sort of mentally incubate it until another platform emerges that could support it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just kind of like, not all ideas are like this, but we had this idea, we knew that people would want it because we could see it. We worked in the enterprise, we knew enterprises would be okay with it, we knew that employees would want it, but the technology wasn't ready yet, right? I mean, the BlackBerry, the RIM control controls that platform. They were unwilling to do anything about it. No APIs or stuff. We couldn't develop a solution. The first iPhone came out, but that was sort of fairly primitive even. But we could see that we're starting to turn that corner, but there weren't really any apps yet. The ecosystem was very closed. And then Android came out, and that was like a much more open platform. And once we saw that definitely things were going in that direction, and we saw that we had the technical capability, certainly initially on Android, to solve this problem, that's when we decided to go and sort of like go head full on in and create the startup.
Right, and so you've now been around for 2 years, right? And you've got 60 employees, 3 countries.
That's right.
One founder in each country.
That's right.
And then you've got a cotton candy machine in your office. We visited their office, and we're pretty taken by this. So maybe talk a little bit about the identity of the 3 offices.
Sure. Yeah. So we found we were unusual, but the day one when we founded, we had 3 founders. We were in 3 continents on day one, right? Like, our investors were very kind to bear with us on this. But New York has the headquarters, London, where my co-founder Alex Truby is, and Hong Kong, where my co-founder David Zhu is. And so we were 3 people, 3 continents. And very early on we said, this is important to us that it all feel like one company. So we have things that span all 3 continents. The color scheme is the same, we paint the offices the same, that the culture is the same, and we operate as one company. But we all wanted to also have the same, some kind of identity as well, which also flows down from the founder who's in each of those regions. So, David runs a very technical office. He has a lot of engineers. They like playing a lot of, they play games during their lunch break. They play Diablo. They play role-playing card games during their lunch. That's their identity. Alex is British. He's very, very British. So they have afternoon tea at 4 p.m. They sit down. It's like time for afternoon tea, and everyone makes tea for everyone, and they eat cookies and biscuits. And then I was just very selfish. I was just like, you know what? I really like cotton candy. I really like it. I can't get it anywhere. We're buying a cotton candy machine. So we have a cotton candy machine in our office. People know how to make cotton candy. It's like a skill that people say, when they come in, they're like, fantastic. You're joining our training program. We have this formal training program. Some of our trainees are here. And the unexpected skill that they have to develop is how to make cotton candy, basically using a full-on cotton candy machine that we have in our office. And so sometimes we come back and we just have a cotton candy party that people can partake in. And we enjoy that. I enjoy that. I don't know if anyone else does.
We enjoyed it too. So, talking about the different geographies, good segue to New York, right? Andrew's interesting. He went to Stanford. Was there for a long time. He's also been in mobile for 12 years or so. But spending so much time in the Valley and then coming to New York. To build an enterprise business, what's sort of your thinking in doing that? Is it easier here? Is it easier in the Valley? What are the trade-offs?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I was here prior to the startup for Morgan Stanley, but there's when we were thinking about doing this company, I could very easily have put the company back in the Valley because I went to school there. I have a lot of friends there. I know that culture very well. But something we saw early on was the New York scene was taking off, and it's not even I think in a question in most people's mind at this point. New York is a completely legitimate place to put a startup, but even above and beyond that, what we saw was for mobile and for enterprise, this is a great place to put a company. And for speaking about enterprise, it's because logically you want to be near where your customers are going to be, right? And in the Valley, oftentimes as a startup, your customers are other early adopters, which tends to be other startups or at least other technologists who happen to be in the Valley. As an enterprise-focused company, we're focused on, certainly for large enterprise, we want to be near those customers. And in terms of being close to a huge concentration of large customers, there's no better place than New York. I mean, I think statistically and also at a gut level, there's no better place than New York where you can sort of just go up and down Broadway and just hit a ton of CIOs, hit a ton of IT guys and get really close to your customer. So I think it's also very logical too when the customers see you and they're like, oh, you're in New York? Fantastic, come on in and see us. I meet people at events where I'm like, oh, they're like a CIO, and they're like, we get a card, we're one of Time Inc.'s top 10 New York startups. I got a card from the Time Inc. CIO while I was there. He's like, yeah, come and see us. We might be able to use your product. That kind of stuff is really great to have just being organically in New York. And it would be much harder in the Valley because our product is just not geared towards necessarily companies of that size.
Yeah. And I think that that even from an ecosystem perspective, we were talking a little bit about this, the Valley ecosystem in many ways is set up for that really young founder to succeed. And sometimes that person, good or bad, just hasn't worked at enterprise, hasn't worked at a Morgan Stanley or an MTV as you did, so it really doesn't even have the awareness of those problems. Whereas in New York, where you have a lot of people who worked at large companies or changed careers or something like that, it's a bit easier to address a problem because you know it, right? Akin to a situation with the managing director, driving himself off the road and typing the code.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I think at its heart, like, entrepreneurship is identifying a problem and fixing it, right? And that problem should be something hopefully you have some kind of connection to. And so, like, people who work in large companies know very well the pain of working in a large company and maybe even how to make it better, and you can make it better. I mean, like, these companies are very open to ways to improve the way that they do business. And so I think the Valley is great for creating certain kinds of technology, disruptive technologies, and changing the way certainly consumers live their lives. But like you said, almost by definition, those same people don't have the experience in the B2B market, and it's much more challenging to create those B2B products because they just don't have that customer intuition. And so I think New York people are actually much better suited to actually solving those problems, and obviously have a great sort of affinity towards entrepreneurship as well.
Is it easier potentially to recruit people here that are fit for Enterproid, because there are so many folks here employed by the enterprise and maybe are attracted to a startup, especially one that's at your stage where it's stable and growing and right here in Manhattan?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think that the challenge of having a startup in New York is the scene is still relatively new, and I know you guys obviously run a lot of events, and you're helping sort of like connect people who want that demand, who want to work with startups, to actual people. And us, we're mature enough that people aren't taking tremendous amounts of risk. At the same time, early enough that I think it's still a fun and dynamic place to work. We're certainly not a big company, but we're decent size for an actual startup. And so we get involved in a lot of New York scenes, doing events like this one, doing on Cube, doing working with the press, getting mentioned by Time Inc. That was great as well. So we try to sort of get involved with the New York scene and community as much as we can.
So let's talk a little bit about the mobile landscape. Obviously, it's shifting, fairly dramatically on the company or enterprise side. You still have, very wide adoption of BlackBerry, but it's declining, quickly on the consumer side. Obviously, Android and iPhone are exploding. So how does that influence your product? I know to this point you've been on the Android platform, and now are releasing the iOS equivalent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So a divide on Android was great for us because we were able to build a really interesting product. This almost like this full virtual phone. You can have it's got a separate environment, managed separately by your company. It looks fully like a full phone. You can have a different phone number you have your work phone number on your work side, your personal phone number on your personal side, different file system, really cool technology. And we built all that, showed it, and said, what, is this a product that's going to resonate with the market? And we got great feedback, and almost uniformly, people are like, wow, something's really interesting. We need that. We also need that on every device, right? And we're like, got it, that makes it, obviously we need to do that. So after that initial Android product resonated, we've been working really hard to make sure people can bring any device that they want into the enterprise. Now, fortunately for us, any device really means two devices, right? It means iOS, iPad, and iPhone, as well as the Android ecosystem. So we're supporting that, and we're sort of going out now and sort of saying, hey, now as an employee, as an employer, you can let your employees bring in these devices into your enterprise. You're not compromising any of your security. You're not compromising any of your needs. We tell people, listen, we came from Morgan Stanley. We understand what you want. And just to your point earlier, that's a really important thing for our customers. I honestly feel that if we were coming out of startups, coming out of Stanford, for example, I'd be like, hey, I came from Stanford, I built this startup, and I understand your enterprise needs. Let me build you this enterprise sort of software. There would be a lot of skepticism, because they'd be like, do you really understand, what this big company's going to need? But we come in and we say, hey, I ran mobile security at Morgan Stanley, don't sweat, I got you covered. And people are like, fantastic, you know, like let's move on to the next thing. So being able to say that really helps us get that credibility when we try to drive into the market.
Yeah. And if anyone out there hasn't seen the product, you should really swing by the booth upstairs. It's beautifully done, and it's pretty amazing if you haven't seen it. So do that, you know, after the panel. Let's pause there. Does anyone have any questions for Andrew, you know, about cotton candy or the enterprise or anything else?
Oh yeah. So the question was, you know, we talked like, are there resources for people trying to sort of like find stuff that's happening in New York? So like, you know, if you're interested in buying these products or interested in finding out, are there startups that can help you out? Like how are we being found basically by other people effectively? So let's talk about time for a moment. So the answer would be, the short answer is no. There aren't very many good resources, I think. I mean, we're getting better. Like if you read Silicon Alley Insider, you know, they cover the Valley, but they have that New York bias, right? They have that map that shows you all the startups on the map, but it's still treated as very novel, and it's and the scene isn't quite at that point yet where it's completely mixed with the mainstream, right? The heartbeat of the of Northern California is the startup community. The heartbeat of New York is not the startup community, and it never will be. And I don't say that because startups will not flourish here; they will. But New York is so much bigger, right, than the Valley. And so it's easy for the Valley to be dominated by technology. I find it hard to believe that, you know, like that you know, financial is so big here, media is huge big here, financial is big here, not financial, fashion is big here. So there's so many other things going on that it's hard to say, you know, what you're going to rise up. That said, companies are trying to help here. So Time, for example, when we saw that we were the top 10 one of the top 10 New York startups, it's not that they also have the top 10 Austin startups, the top 10 Bay Area startups, the top 10, which is what you kind of think that they have. They don't. They actually just have the top 10 New York startups. And the reason they full on say is, we want to support New York startups, right? Like we're New York based. We want to support this. We're going to make a special effort to support the New York scene, and that's a really nice benefit of being out here. Is you're like, hey, that's great. You know, there's a huge party, there's an event, there's media they put on around it. So there's definitely interest in supporting the scene, but at the same time, obviously, there is a challenge in rising above the noise because New York's good at so many things, right? You're not going to necessarily get front and center in the Wall Street Journal every day.
And I think it's an interesting time to be focused on enterprise problems, right? There's this growing interest in startups in general. I think there's also growing interest coming from the enterprise in attaching themselves to startups, right? I think that they want to appear progressive. They want to adopt technologies that are being developed by, you know, these sort of young, growing firms. But it's also very, very difficult, right? And the sales cycle into enterprise can be lengthy, can be frustrating. Obviously, the payoff is big if you get one enterprise, you know, client. You often have a chance to sort of commercialize your business. If you get 10, you've got, in theory, a large business. But it can be very hard to do that. Andrew, you actually taught this internally at Morgan Stanley, right?
That's right. So we had something called the CTO Summit, where when I was at Morgan Stanley, we would go on a tour, go actually out to the Valley, and there would actually be we would actually teach sessions on how to sell to large companies, like companies like Morgan Stanley, where you try to break people out of the mindset that like, I have a great product, therefore you will buy it, right? And that link is not one step with a large company. You know, there's all sorts of other stuff that has to go in terms of getting awareness of your product in the company, finding the right person in the company to talk to, managing the sales cycle. You know, I do talks in New York about this specifically, where I say, you know, don't be the 11th thing for somebody. You know, there's going to be 10 things that a company is prioritizing this year. No matter how important your problem is, don't be the 11th thing. Find a way to connect your problem to one of the 10 things that they're actually working on. Don't try and convince them that your problem is so important that they need to work on it. That's not how big companies work. Their roadmaps and their objectives are set quite in advance, and budgets are set quite in advance. There's nothing wrong with that. Like you said, there's a good payoff because there's discipline around it. They have money, that's the great thing. And they know that they will spend money on these things, but you have to know their culture. You have to know how they buy. For example, a challenge for a startup is very simply, it might be too risky for a company to buy your product. They might love your product, but it might say, you're not funded well enough. What happens if I buy your product and you disappear in 6 months? What am I going to do? I'm screwed, right? And a big company can't take that amount of risk. So you have to find ways to just, the guy loves your product. He wants to roll it out. He wants to pay for it. And his own sort of procurement department says, no, you may not purchase this product. It's too risky. Very frustrating because you've done everything you can do at this point as a startup to sell your product. You've got the sale, but some other person is sort of shutting it down within the company. There are ways around that, but you have to know how to sort of navigate it. You know, you have to know how to find the right partners, get a reseller who can front your product so that that risk can be mitigated. You can absolutely get around it, but you have to deal with some extra stuff.
And maybe give an example, an anonymous one, but of a time when you were selling into enterprise and it was dragging on sort of endlessly. And what were some of the tricks or tactics you used based on your experience to sort of close the sale?
Yeah, so I mean, like when you sell into enterprises, I think that there's a couple different things. Like first of all, people are going to always want to try your product. Large enterprises, they have people whose entire jobs are to evaluate products and test them and stuff like that. And it's fantastic. The first barrier to getting in is convincing that one person that your product is actually going to solve a problem that they have, right? The next step is actually driving it forward is you have to connect it to a business stakeholder, connect it to an actual problem that a business stakeholder has, right? So when I was at Morgan Stanley, I may fall in love with a product. I'm like, oh wow, this is going to be a really good product to come in. Great product, great team, great vision, all those things. But if I really want to make this sure that this thing rolls out, it's going to be more than just me, the guy who works at Morgan Stanley. It's got to be, I then go and talk to my business stakeholders and I have to sell them. So you have to realize what you're doing is actually a two-stage sale. It's not I sell to that IT guy or I sell to whoever the first guy is and I'm done. He is going to have to go and sell on that product to the next person, his boss, his business stakeholder, his finance committee, his legal team. So you now need to equip this guy and turn him into your champion, your advocate, and have him know your stuff inside and out, know the good sides of your stuff, know the bad sides of your stuff, right? Because he's going to need to go in there and talk to someone who might be skeptical about your product, and they're going to ask him hard questions. And if he's just drunk the Kool-Aid and he hasn't thought about the bad stuff, he's not going to be equipped to defend your product when he goes to his finance committee. So you got to actually go and just bite the bullet and make sure he's really educated so he can champion your product through that process on that other side and get it through. And I think a lot of people miss that. What they've done is, I convinced this one guy, why hasn't it gone anywhere? The reason is he's having difficulty convincing other stakeholders to actually buy in. And that's why you've not gone anywhere, even though you're hearing all the right things from this first guy. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. That while most people are aware conceptually of what they're trying to solve, they don't have that intuition yet about how they want to solve it. So even if they think what our product is really cool, we have to kind of give them that confidence so that they're ready to buy, because they only started thinking about this 6 months ago. It's still very fast, very, very fast for a business to move, and we got to kind of overcome that. Oh my God, this seems very quick. Things are moving much faster than we expected, and that's kind of what we have to overcome. Yeah.
And is security one of the biggest issues that you face when you're sort of selling to customers, and how does your technology handle that?
Yeah, it's a really big issue for a lot of our customers. The great thing is, security is in our lifeblood. Like I did mobile security at Stanford, I did mobile security at Morgan Stanley. We have multiple security experts on our team. We're pretty unique in that we have such a strong security background, yet we don't sell security. We just say, you know what, here's this amazing product, it's got a great user experience, it solves this high-level business problem, and it's also amazing secure. And we just kind of like toss it on the side. A lot of the people who have the security background we have sell security. They walk in and talk about how good their encryption is and how hacker-proof it is. We have all that, but we kind of just keep it on the back burner. If someone asks about it, we're happy to do like a day-long session with their security people. Like our carrier partners ask about it, our customers ask about it. We love it to go in there and talk about how secure our product is, but we don't sell security, because at the end of the day, people don't buy security, they buy secure products that fix other business problems.
So you mentioned that you're rolling out on the iOS platform, and what's sort of the timing for that?
Yeah, so basically, it's very important to us to be able to obviously be on iOS and on Android. We've gone through the initial approvals for Apple. We're just putting the finishing touches on it. Our initial pilot customers are kicking the tires. We're very proud of that product. And obviously, one of the things that we focus on as a user experience is that it should feel native. So when we talk about Divide, it's not some third thing as in here's our vision for Divide. When you use Divide on Android, it's super native feeling. It feels like you have a custom Android phone just for work. When you're on iOS, it should feel like you've got a custom iOS environment just for work. We don't try and bring Android to iOS or vice versa. We don't think that's what people want. If you want iOS, you love iOS, it should feel completely native to you. If you love Android, you're on Android, it should feel completely native to you. That's been our design philosophy for quite some time, and that's resonated very strongly with our customers and on the IT side and on the end user side.
And so what's next? You've obviously got a huge rollout pending there.
Yep.
And then have you identified possibility of other products that are related that your customers have identified and shown an appetite for, or is there just such a long runway on this single and massive problem?
So the initial problem is kind of moving sideways from the BlackBerry, right? So what do people use BlackBerries for today? They use it for email, contacts, and calendaring, really. That's what most people use it for. Maybe some BBM, and certainly some telephony. So our base product is an email, contacts, calendar based product, but we also, like I mentioned earlier, we have a way to let you get your desk phone, so your work phone number, have a separate phone number for work and a separate phone number for personal life on the same device. We have a way to integrate as companies move towards the cloud for their cloud files, secure cloud files. We have a way to plug that right into the mobile system. We have a way to basically provide even more security through endpoint security, like virus scanning and all those kinds of things, and plug those in. So the base product that we're talking about today is just that initial kind of the beachhead onto the device, and then what we then roll out is more and more functionality on top of that base level, and that's what our customers are really looking forward to. So they kind of buy it for that. They buy it for that initial for email, and they stay for this deep roadmap we have of integrating into their existing investments in IT.
So pretty fascinating. We've got just a few minutes left. We'll open it up for questions if there are any. If you have a question, I think given the noise here, it probably makes sense to just come up and use the mic in the front.
Any questions? No? All right.
Any questions? No questions? Cotton candy?
I didn't bring the machine today. I was tempted to. We could have given it out, but some sugar. All right.
Maybe no one's asking questions because it's so awkward to come up here and do this. But I'm just curious about how you plan to grow you touched on this a little bit, so maybe you can just elaborate on your New York office, your London office, and your Hong Kong office. Two questions. One is, are they going to all be sort of divide in their own area and they're just going to tap into those markets? So the New York office, the team makeup is similar to the London team makeup. And two, is there ever going to be a divide sort of group retreat where everyone comes together and can I go?
Yeah. We're unique in the way we run, in that not only do we have the separate offices, it's a good question, but we actually divide up the functional teams, right? So development is almost entirely Hong Kong. It's not just each office is like a regional office taking care of sales and marketing in those regions. The way we solve this problem, I think, I'm very proud of it, is every senior member of the executive team I am, for example, CEO. That's my global role, but I am also general manager of New York and North America. Alex is chief customer officer, but he is general manager of Europe, of EMEA. Dave is chief technology officer, CTO. That's his global role, but he is also general manager of Asia. So there's kind of this dual role where you're looking after your office and you're looking after business to some extent in your region. So if I need to send someone to Japan, even though most of sales and marketing is run out of North America, most likely David will send someone from his office because it just makes a lot of sense to send someone to Japan from Hong Kong versus Japan from New York. So that's a great thing we're able to do is, almost anywhere in the world, people make an inquiry and they're like, oh, could you say, we're in Germany, is there any way you can come to Germany? We're like, no problem, right? Someone from the Europe office will come to Germany. We love being able to do that. Singapore, great, someone from the Hong Kong office will go to Singapore. That said, the functional role of that office is largely development, and that's because we love to hire generalists. So we have people whose main role is development or product who can put on a BD hat for a day and pop out and do a BD meeting. And if it gets really serious, yeah, probably Nick or one of our chief sales guy would then make the trip out there. But he doesn't have to go out there for the first trip because we have enough generalists in each region who can sort of cross over and do that. So that's really helpful. So all regions grow at all times. On the point about the group retreat, that's a great. I would love. We've talked about that. I would love to try and figure out a way to do a group retreat where everybody's going to come into one region. We haven't figured out what that would look like right now. Like right now we have like the office retreat. So we have ski trips coming out of New York office. Like we might do something out. Go out to do a house in the Hamptons or something like that. That'll be fun as well. Hong Kong has its own. So they go on boat trips and junk trips and fishing trips. London, because it's British, does nothing. So that's maybe that's their thing. So they just sit in the office. But like at some point I really do want to do like a global offsite, and we'll figure. Maybe we'll all go like on a cruise or something, or meet in the middle. I don't know where the middle is. It's like the North Pole is the middle. All right.
Wait, one more question.
Oh wait, that's over here.
Oh, you want me to ask a question? Oh, I think we're leaving. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, you ask.
Why don't we go for you first? It's just not too in a row.
You mentioned a couple of times about how you're well funded, and so for startups, sometimes this is like a question of when do you go for funding and at what levels or how big. And so, did you come in with funding, with a large level of funding, or can you discuss that?
Yeah, I mean,
to an extent.
Let me just repeat the question. I think the question was around funding, and it's a core issue for startups, and so the question is sort of when to do it, what was the timing, and directly to Andrew, did you have funding when you started the idea?
Yeah. So obviously a good question. Let me quickly caveat that when you look at any startup, when someone says they're well funded, normally what that means is how many months of funding do they have, right? So you could raise $100 million and your burn rate is so high that's 6 months of runway. That's not well funded, right? So that should be the definition you use when people are talking. So basically, when you raise money, you normally raise for between 18 and 24 months of runway. So we did that when we did it. Our last round was an $11 million Series A, which was for about that period of time. So that's what we mean by being well funded. So oftentimes when you're on the earlier stages, that window comes down. So when you do seed funding, often seed funding is for a much shorter period of time. So you raise something like $200,000, which will last you 6 months, right? That's not well funded because the runway is just not long. 6 months is not a long time, right? Raising venture funding is a whole art in and of itself, right? I'm happy to talk about it, but it's a whole session in and of itself. But I will say that we started with a friends and family round. We had funding day 0. We were very lucky to have that. It's not necessarily the way you always should go. It's not necessarily the optimal way to go. It's a very nice luxury to have because you can pay yourself something early on. But I would go out there and I would say it's different for every company. It depends on when you first start out. Can you go without paying yourself a salary? How long can you go? How long can you go without paying yourself a salary, right? Because you can always do more. You can always do more to increase your valuation. The key is this art of playing this sort of wave of valuation, which tends to be spike, more plateau, spike, more plateau, and you always want to try and raise right after you've had that spike, versus after you're plateauing and trying to get a feel for when those inflection points are going to be. It's a very hard thing to project in advance. I've been there, but that's really the art that people are going for. So you don't have to have funding, but it depends on what you're working on. If you're going out and saying, I'm going to make something, I'm going to literally go and make bags, you probably need to raise funding earlier because you need to make something, you need to pay factories, you need to buy components. If you're the great thing about these days, if you want to make software, we were talking about this, it's often cheaper if you know how to write software, right? Then it's often very cheap because you can just do it yourself and it's fine. If you need to go hire an external company to write that software for you, it can be extraordinarily expensive. So it really depends on every individual company is different, and you need to tailor your fundraising to your company and not let anybody else tell you what's right for you.
Right. The last question is maybe for folks that have companies here. I know that at Wakefield, it's a serious question for us because our product is appealing to different markets, right? So not just US or New York. I'm curious on what your advice is on, like, how much has being in 3 different markets accelerated your growth? Like, do you feel like if you were just in New York that you'd be fine, you'd be growing, or do you feel like being in China and being in London that you have really accelerated your growth, and it's something that a lot of companies just don't do, and do you advise that they consider it? Is it something where, okay, if you're getting started, you've got a decent amount of funding, hey, plant somebody in London if your product is relevant there, and start your growth there because you can get in early and you have these access to different markets? That's a really important question for us.
So I would say it's not for everyone. I would say it depends on what your risk tolerance is, and it depends on how experienced you are at managing a team. And I literally mean managing in the sense of managing, as in, like, how confident are you in the day-to-day managing and running and communication and syncing up and controlling and setting KPIs and setting objectives and all these things. Because one of the only ways we made it work is our founding team. We weren't just like meeting up on Craigslist and, hey, let's go do this, and you happen to be in Hong Kong, no problem. We knew each other for years, right? We knew each other, we knew how we worked, and not only did we know each other for years, we knew we knew how to work in different regions. And because of that, we kind of had a really good base understanding of how to manage this team. And even for us, it's a challenge, but we've managed to get much more out of it because of that. So it's really accelerated our growth. We love the fact that we're global. Our partners love the fact that we're global. We're able to have these conversations, like I said, like really serious conversations about like launching and taking over Japan, for example, that we just wouldn't be able to do. We were internationalized into 10 languages, really early on, and we could get, a lot of licensing revenue because of that. So it's really benefited us. On the other hand, I do not want to diminish how challenging it is from a management standpoint. So people, you have to have a very good, deep confidence that you're going to be able to run this, and if you do, you'll reap great benefits.
All right, well, we are out of time, but very exciting, and I certainly look forward to following the next 6 to 12 months of progress. Again, I do encourage everybody to swing by the booth. It's pretty awesome stuff.
I appreciate it. All right, thanks everybody.